The secret accounts are not secret, they're private. There are those out there today who profess to have discovered the secret accounts, who profess to being the first to prove they exist, the first to discharge a debt, the first to do this and that. These people claim that we have a right to these accounts because they are poisoning us, because they are shysters and shills, because they are this and they are that. Please allow me to try to set the record straight and give you the rest of the story. I am not one to make judgments of right and wrong, nor am I one to dash the hopes and dreams of others. But when I see something that is operating contrary to established standards and research, it raises a huge red flag for me. This movement towards the ACH and the secret accounts raises several red flags for me. Let me tell you why. Through the years, I have successfully discharged mortgages, loans, student loans, child support, and taxes through accessing these accounts. But unless you can repeat an experiment and obtain the same results over and over again, it remains a theory and a process not perfected. We have been unable to perfect any of the processes. In 2001, a small group of us carried out an experiment with the intent of proving or disproving several theories around our economic system and its fiat currency. We were able to establish, in fact, that there is a public and a private side to every account, that the tender of Federal Reserve notes is not a valid discharge of a debt, that a tender of private funds via an instrument, such as a closed account check, was a valid discharge of a debt, and that a tender of private funds was a valid and effective method of redeeming the property. Please do not go out and write checks on a closed account. I was charged with writing bad checks, although I did eventually beat the charges. I was assisting a woman in a tax evasion case in federal court when the U.S. Attorney stated in a hearing that, although the defendant has tendered sufficient Federal Reserve notes to satisfy the debt remains unpaid. He had testified that Federal Reserve notes are not a valid payment of a debt. I issued a closed account check to the IRS for the taxes due, and at the next hearing, the same U.S. Attorney stated, even though the taxes have now been paid in full, we intend to proceed with these proceedings, establishing, in fact, that the closed account check is a valid payment of a debt. During the same experiment, we had theorized that the annual property tax was the redemption value of the property. We knew that Federal Reserve notes were not a valid discharge of debt and therefore would not be useful in redeeming the property. I went to the county auditor and got the annual tax bill for 42 pieces of property, then went to the treasurer and I issued 42 closed account checks for the redemption of that property. I requested they place my name and address on each property as a party of interest. This effectively redeemed the property, removing them from the collateral rolls of the United States. The property was no longer under the jurisdiction of the state or federal codes and statutes. They made several attempts in the courts to regain title to the property to no avail. They had no jurisdiction over the property. Eventually, I was told that there was not a court or government agency in the world who could take the property from me except through abandonment of the property. I was arrested, charged, and convicted on bogus charges and sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. I was unable to take possession of the property, and after 3 years, the property was considered abandoned, and they were able to reclaim the property. We have experimented with several processes to access the accounts for the purpose of discharging the debt for the redemption of the property. We have issued bonds, certificates, promissory notes, closed account checks, each with their own measure of success, but never continuously repeatable. We learned that the Social Security number is the public side of the account, that the red number on the reverse of the Social Security card is the private side of the account. Next, while working with bankers, we turned our attention to digital. Each letter attached to the red number on the Social Security card corresponded to a Federal Reserve branch. Using their routing number with our private account number, we began doing Fedwire transfers and money orders. The Fedwire process evolved into the EFT, electronic funds transfers. It was exciting and great fun. Then, payments were being reversed. Some payments would stick for months before they were reversed. Accounts were being closed, banks demanding payment or worse, demanding the return of the property and foreclosing. There were threats of charges and finally an arrest of one guy who ended up doing 5 years in prison. An expensive experiment. We learned that the ACH, the Automated Clearinghouse, was for public funds transfers. We learned that the EFT, the Electronic Funds Transfer, was the private funds transfers, bank-to-bank transfers bypassing the ACH. When you do an EFT using the Federal Reserve routing number and the red number on the reverse side of the SS card, you are initiating a transfer directly from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to the recipient. The private funds, your asset, are merged with the public debt, your liability, and the accounts are zeroed out. That is the set-off and discharge. We figured out that when transactions went through the ACH, they were reversed, and we were advised to use the EFT. But someone kept forcing the payments through the ACH mechanism. The payments reversed. Or were they actually being reversed? We found that commingling of private and public funds opens the door to seizure. When you attempt to send private funds via a public mechanism, the ACH, you are commingling funds. Are these payments being reversed or seized? We learned that you cannot deposit private funds into PayPal nor in your bank accounts, that you cannot process a private payment via ACH, that you cannot assume the recipient is refusing or reversing the payments, and you cannot count your chickens before they hatch. And then I need to ask, why does anybody want the funds? There are an illusion, digits on a screen. I want the property. The funds are to facilitate the redemption of the property, not to stack up in a bank account. We cannot solve the issues of the day from the same perspective in which we created them. Einstein. First, we need to see the issue from a new perspective. We need to stop hacking at the branches and start chopping at the roots. They are blocking redemption of the property. Our property, our divine inheritance. Remember, FDR's New Deal became a mortgage on the property and labor of the people. We are the beneficial owners of the property with an absolute right of redemption. This is about right, title, and interest in property, and the clogging of redemption of equity, an issue that we can narrow down to one specific act. The Trading with the Enemy Act, as amended by Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933, that labeled all Americans enemies of the state and authorized the seizure of our property. We have a right to the funds as they were created from our good faith and credit. These private funds are the only avenue to the redemption of the property. As beneficial owners in original jurisdiction, we have an absolute right of redemption of the property. Why then are people getting results that are absolutely contrary to the fundamental principles of banking? The answer is not good. Please see the rest of the story, Part 2.